Okay, I see the doors closing in the back and the bells are chiming. We're at time, so we'll go ahead and get started since we only have a short 45 minutes for this session. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sabrina Atack, the NRC's Deputy Executive Director for Reactor and Preparedness Programs. I'm pleased and honored to be moderating this session. This is the EDO plenary session where we're going to focus on evolving the NRC mindset, culture, mission, and the future of regulation. So I'd like to start by having my distinguished panel introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their background before we get into our conversation. Mike?
Thanks, Sabrina. And hi, everyone. I'm Mike King. As Sabrina said, I'm the Executive Director for Operations here at the NRC. And for those maybe unfamiliar with what that role is, it's the equivalent of a Chief Operating Officer. So I have the privilege of being able to execute and implement the Commission policy that's established by the Commission. And to do that, I have supervision responsibility for all the major offices across the agency. So all the materials business lines, the operating reactors, new reactors, security areas, and our mission support areas. So, in implementing that, I leverage some of my background, which I've been with the agency now, it's hard to believe, already 21 years. I started my career in our Region 2 office in Atlanta, Georgia. And for those unfamiliar, the agency has 4 regional offices, and our regional administrators are joining us in the front here today, and our headquarters office here in Rockville. So the first 11 years I was in Region 2 in Atlanta. I was a resident inspector at every one of our nuclear power plants in the United States. We have at least 2 federal employees we call resident inspectors embedded day to day at each nuclear power plant. I got the opportunity to experience that. So, and then 11 years into my career, I came here to headquarters and started my executive opportunities, and I've done a number of roles. And so recently, about 9 months ago, I was given the opportunity to act as the executive director, and here more recently was made permanent. So a year ago, when I was on stage, Mirella Gavrilas, who I saw running around earlier, was the executive director at the time. Little did I know that months later, I would be sitting beside her up here as the executive director. So it's been an absolute privilege, and I look forward to the conversation we're going to have today.
All right, Mike, thank you. My name's Jeff Place. I'm Executive Vice President of Industry Strategy at the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, or INPO. INPO also operates the Atlanta Center for the World Association of Nuclear Operator. In my role, I'm responsible for all the industry-facing work we do for 8 countries, 67 stations, 129 reactors. And we're really in place to help support excellent safety and reliability in those stations, and then also helping the rest of the world through the other centers and want to improve their performance as well. I've been at INPO for going on 27 years. In that time, I also was loaned out to Xcel Energy to be the Vice President of Nuclear Fleet Operations for a time period. Prior to coming to INPO, and I've done most of the roles that INPO has in place, I worked at 4 different nuclear stations, a variety of different leadership roles, and then prior to that, I was in the U.S. Nuclear Navy as well.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Judi Greenwald. I'm the President and CEO of the Nuclear Innovation Alliance, or NIA. NIA is a think and do tank, and our mission is to help create the conditions for success for new nuclear energy so it can play a major role as an energy security and a climate solution. NIA makes recommendations for a range of critical issues in the nuclear energy sector, including for NRC reform. And we do this based on deep analysis and stakeholder engagement. One example of our work, which I'm hoping it can come up a little bit during this conversation, is that we have unique insights into NRC organizational culture because we did one-on-one interviews and a Chatham House Rules workshop on this topic last June with former commissioners and NRC employees. And this led to a report that we published in October 2025, and that was called Improving Nuclear Regulatory Commission Organizational Culture, and that included a set of recommendations for NRC. In terms of my background, I've done a lot of things over a long time. I started as a young child, and I think that my nuclear piece, which has really been this last since 2020 that I've really been doing nuclear full-time, and it's fascinating to me that so much has been happening just in the 6 years since I took this job. And but before that, and also still, I work on a lot of other technologies, energy systems analysis, climate solutions more broadly, and really trying to understand and improve our nation's energy security and climate optionality.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andrea Kock. I'm the director of the Office of Nuclear Materials Safety and Safeguards. I was inspired by Commissioner Wright's reflection on his journey, that it was about exactly 30 years ago that I showed up in our Region 3 office outside Chicago as an inspector. Since then, I've worked in every business line at the NRC, including 2 regions. And so I'm really excited to be part of this panel because one thing I don't share a lot about myself is, in addition to being a health physicist, I also have a degree in psychology. And that, I think, has given me a unique perspective about mindset and culture at the agency that I've carried with me through my entire career. I think that gives me a unique perspective. And it really is a moment in time for us now to really think about what a shift in mindset means and what shifting our culture means at the agency. And I think through my experience, I've seen the how of how we regulate change through the years and what has worked and what has not worked. And I've had a unique opportunity to lead several efforts to try and transform the way we regulate. And I'm really hoping to be able to share part of that during the panel session today, although we only have 45 minutes.
Well, it sounds like we have a great discussion ahead, so let's jump into it. So I'd like us to have an organic conversation. I have some questions to tee off the panel, but as you hear a topic that's of interest to you, or if you have a perspective, feel free to chime in on it as we get underway. So I'm going to start with Mike. I think we've touched on the update to the NRC's mission statement. The chairman, the commissioners have spoken about that, and how some parts are retained, institutionally, the need to protect public health and safety, but also to take on a bit more of this enabling mindset. So can you talk about, in your role as the EDO, what you've done to help the staff undertake this enabling mindset and your perspectives on how we're doing in that realm?
Yeah, so as I mentioned a year ago when I was on the stage, I was in the role of the Advance Act lead for the agency. And at that time, we were in the thick of things in terms of working with the commission to update our mission statement. And so we knew at the time what was going to be most important, wherever we ended up with the revised mission statement, is that we implemented it in a way that was enduring. And so one of the key aspects of that is ensuring that the mission statement, that everybody at the agency could see themselves and their role and how they would implement the mission statement. And so what we've done, and anybody can go online, if you go to the NRC website and About Us and click the link about our mission, you can see the guidance that we developed, the detailed guidance for how we will use the updated mission statement to guide our operations and how our behaviors at the agency. And so what we did, we took the 4 different key elements of our updated mission statement, and you in particular have highlighted this enabling aspect and the enabling mindset, but also what's been discussed earlier today was the benefit to society aspect. Of course, our safety and security mission is paramount, has not changed as part of that. And then efficiency was brought forefront in the updated mission statement. So we took those 4 elements and we expanded on what behaviors are in support of those elements, and a lot of them have been talked about already today. It's a lot of it is just making sure that we spend time where it matters. We consider safety first before we launch and do any sort of review effort. As we're going about and doing inspections, we consider the significance of the issue and use that to judge what amount of time we're going to spend on issues. And so we took that, if you look at that guidance document, there's behaviors that we identified that are applicable to everybody broadly across the agency. And then we took that guidance and we said, okay, for inspectors doing oversight functions, what are the subset of behaviors beyond just the general guidance? They're really unique so that they can really see themselves and what's new and different about the revised mission statement and what that means to them. Things like, for inspectors, making sure that if it's a low-level safety issue, you consider our use of our screening tool to resolve those issues sooner. We call it very low safety significance issue resolution process. Some of you may be familiar with. And then broadly across the board, a recognition of the need for us to be timely in our decision making. We've got to do our responsibilities, but be timely about the decisions. We also took the guidance and we developed position-specific guidance about licensing activities. So folks that are doing licensing reviews, how do they apply the mission statement to how they're doing business, being really open and engaging as they're in interacting with licensees and applicants to ensure that any regulatory gaps are clearly addressed and that we offer proposed alternatives that a licensee could consider in addressing those regulatory gaps, as opposed to just waiting to see their proposed response to those, and looking for ways to use the most efficient approach to bridge any regulatory gaps. Use like phone calls to clarify things that are unclear, and using less formal methods than sending a letter and a formal request for additional information. So that lays out the behaviors, but we have to hold ourselves accountable. So another key aspect of what you'll see in there is we were updating our accountability metrics. So we were measuring, if we're doing these behaviors, what would we expect to see in our timeliness and the number of licensing actions across the board. And so we've developed some pretty ambitious metrics. So metrics that won't always be green, and we recognize that. It's a stretch for us as an agency. We want to challenge ourselves. So we've developed these metrics, and now we're also in the process of taking those metrics and having everyone at the agency feel a piece of that metric. So from the executives at the top of the agency all the way down to every staff in the agency, those metrics are driven all the way down through the organization. So they understand what's expected of them, the vision and the direction of the agency is clear, and we all feel accountable to deliver results. We're also improving our recognition piece of this. Very excited, recently we got to take advantage of recent congressional opportunity provided to us through the Advance Act to issue Advance Act awards. And for federal employees who, we struggle sometimes competing with external commercial salaries, those are significant. And so we appreciate that Congress given this additional flexibility, and we took advantage of it. So I could go on and on, but there's probably others may have opinions on where we're at with that.
Yeah, and I think I might pick up on your discussion around accountability. And I think it's important for us to hold ourselves accountable. And we're certainly doing, I think, a phenomenal job of that. I'm really proud of the NRC staff and the mindset changes and the results they've been able to deliver. I think hearing from external perspectives, what the view is of how the NRC is performing is also really helpful. So Judi, I'm going to come to you next. And you recently testified before Congress and highlighted the importance of NRC remaining a strong, credible, technically competent, independent regulator. And that's important to sustain public trust. You highlighted the importance of that. So with the significant changes underway at the agency, how would you characterize external perceptions of the NRC, and what areas do you think we should be prioritizing to strengthen stakeholder confidence and meet expectations moving forward?
Thanks for the question. As many of you know, NIA has long advocated for NRC to do its job more efficiently while maintaining safety and public trust. And the way we think about public trust is we have three pillars. One, expert staff. So many of you are here. Two, transparency. And three, independence. It's been a long year, sort of seeing a lot of heads nodding at that one. And a lot has happened at NRC. I think in early 2025, we were very concerned about what was happening with respect to all three pillars. By the end of the year, we saw some encouraging developments, but we still need further action to safeguard public trust, and we have some recommendations as to help make that happen. We think this administration sincerely wants to catalyze a nuclear renaissance, as we do at NIA, but I think some folks new to nuclear came in last year with the idea that NRC was the problem, and then I think the realization grew over the year that NRC was key to the solution. And I think that happened because you all demonstrated that you're good at your job. And initially, I think there was insufficient appreciation for your technical capacity, how much regulatory reform was already underway, and how much progress there was to build on. I also think there was insufficient appreciation for the importance of keeping NRC independent from DOE, but recent actions like the updated Memorandum of Understanding between NRC and DOE indicate real progress to us on cooperating while maintaining NRC's independence. And I was really heartened by Secretary Wright's remarks yesterday about the importance of NRC's independence and partnership. Looking back over the year, we've been particularly impressed with how much the NRC has accomplished in ADVANCE Act implementation. The ADVANCE Act included many provisions to make NRC more efficient, and NRC's delivering. And a couple of key examples are the speed of the recent licensing actions, like the construction permit for TerraPower, the fee reform rulemaking. We've also seen a number of positive organizational improvements. Chairman Need's management initiatives, as well as the Differing View program becoming more timely, aligned with recommendations from that organizational culture report that I mentioned earlier. And the new guidance to help staff navigate the distinction between enabling and consulting, which is really tricky, is encouraging more constructive engagement while treating all license applicants and licensees fairly. However, we're very concerned about the first pillar expert staff, as I know you all are, with a record number of licensing applications and pre-application engagements. Retaining and attracting staff is incredibly important and it's key to a high-performing agency. And as we all know, last year NRC lost over 400 employees, including many high-level managers. We have several recommendations on staff retention and recruitment in our report. For example, one was NRC should expand its technical leadership pathways for employees who prefer mastery of technical subjects over managerial roles. And I think that might be particularly important in the context of the reorg, where maybe there's fewer management slots, but there's also a lot of people who see their path as technical rather than managerial. And we also said, and it's great to hear what Mike just said about the ADVANCE Act awards, that NRC should expand its efforts to celebrate and recognize staff achievements, for example, through the ADVANCE Act. So we're very excited about that. I'm hearing from companies engaging with the NRC that the interaction is constructive, but that the loss of personnel is hurting. And I'm hopeful that with your and the Commission's leadership, NRC can rebuild and emerge even stronger. With respect to the second pillar, transparency, the NRC has historically been very transparent with the public about its processes and decisions, but recent actions are reducing that transparency. And in particular, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, or we heard a little bit about this yesterday, the White House Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, or ORIA, is now restricting what the NRC can share with the public on its rulemakings. And we recommend that the staff and the Commission return to their tradition of greater transparency. Many people know I say the serenity prayer a lot. Grant me the serenity to accept what I cannot change, the courage to change what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And many people say that the OIRA process is something that cannot be changed, and I respectfully disagree. I think the initial OIRA process was laid out in an executive order with subsequent guidance, and its new applicability to NRC and other independent agencies was laid out in another executive order. And either of these executive orders, or at least they're implementing guidance, and I'll say that part again because I have not heard this recommended elsewhere, at least the implementing guidance could be modified to allow for a return to greater transparency of NRC's previously established rulemaking processes. We're also very concerned that stakeholders will have only 30 days to comment on the many proposed rules. We recommend NRC extend that time frame, and we at NIA certainly need more time to provide genuinely helpful comments. Changes to increase the likelihood that this new set of rules are well vetted and will endure could be part of the whole of government collaborative approach we heard a lot about yesterday. So to reframe, I don't think this is just about NRC pushing back against something. I think it's NRC being part of the whole of government approach and having the whole of government figure out what's best to make sure that this set of changes endures and has the buy-in and the vetting that's essential for this to become an enduring set of positive change. And I do understand that in parallel, the NRC is looking to create other ways to foster transparency, and I commend that, and I look forward to hearing what you're up to on that.
Yeah, Sabrina, I'd like to add to the question around accountability, and I think Mike hit on a couple of things that I think are really central to getting that environment of accountability, and not accountability done to me, but my ownership of what I'm expected. And I think you mentioned the word behaviors. So I think behaviors is just absolutely critical in getting the entire staff to understand what the behaviors are expected and then reinforce that. The key that I would say that we see across the industry, whether it's at IMPO, whether it's at any of our utility members or our sister organizations, NEI, EPRI, NEAL, is that alignment at the leadership team and that consistent reinforcement of what's expected. And that's where I think you're really going to be able to see that level of accountability, because you're going to set clear expectations, then you're going to reinforce that as a leadership team. It just creates the environment that you're going to get done what you said you're going to get done, in the time that you said you were going to do it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jeff. And I think it's really important. One thing I like to do is, if I didn't see an outcome I was expecting or hoping for, is to take a moment and take stock of, did I set the expectation, right? So, it's ownership on me for having not set the expectation up front of what I was looking for. So I think that's a great segue for us to talk about IMPO's management model. So Chairman mentioned it yesterday, and that was one of the challenges he presented to us when he arrived here at the NRC. It was really for us to take stock of how we communicate to the staff and ensure alignment. We've had initiatives over the years, and recently we had the leadership model, and I think a lot of the content is still the same as what we think we need, the values, the principles of good regulation. And perhaps part of what we struggled with was really memorializing that, right, and making it sustainable. So can you talk about IMPO's management model and how it's been so successful?
Yeah, I'll share a few things, and again, I'll go back to, IMPO, we serve the industry, and so it's not just our management model, but what we see across the industry, like I said, at our sister organizations and utility members, when they have a defined management model of how things are done and how people do what they're expected to do, the business runs better. And I think I'll go back to what Chairman Nee said yesterday as one of his, I think it was his number 2 priority around leadership and organizational excellence. And I think that is spot on, because that organizational excellence and continuous improvement culture feeds upon itself over time, and people really can rally around that. The key with the model, and it's not, there's no magic to it. It's really just laying out very clearly what you're expecting of people, what you expect of yourself, so people can clearly see themselves in the purpose, the mission that you've got laid out. One of the things that we have put in place, it was actually a principles document that we wrote back in 2015. The industry has pretty well adopted this. It's 15005 leadership and team effectiveness attributes. But to pull all the leadership and team effectiveness attributes together, we have what's called essential outcomes. And so it really starts with setting the direction of not just where you're going, where you want to go, but it's what are the procedures, what is the governance, what are the behaviors that you expect, setting that direction. Once you do that, you really do need to maximize the competence of the workforce. And I've heard a lot over the last couple of days from the commissioners and others about the development, the training. That's going to be critical, and getting the entire staff from the commission on down to a high level of competence around what is expected, is in giving those individuals the tools that are necessary for them to be successful. Because it's not fair to set your expectation if you're not going to give them the knowledge, skills, and abilities to actually meet what you're expecting them to do. So maximizing that competence. And then engaging the workforce. And this is really where, in my opinion, the rubber meets the road, because you got to get into the hearts and minds of the people that are working and understanding, and they need to individually see their portion of the purpose, the mission, and why what they do every day is important. And so you need to engage that workforce, and then you got to cope with risk. Things are never going to go right. And so learning how to, once you're able to engage that workforce, make risk-based decisions and be able to stand behind those and do that in a timely manner. I know at IMPO, for example, we've made a number of changes to a lot of our operations. And I will tell you, every major operational change that we made, there was a portion of our organization that thought we were driving the Institute off a cliff. And you need to, those other things that you do up to that point help set the stage, and you need to you need to be listening, you need to think about what they're saying and really take that on board and make it part of the decision-making process. But then you got to make a decision, and you got to clearly articulate what that decision is, and you got to move on. And you can't allow individuals have veto power over what you're trying to do for the entire organization. And all of that comes together in achieving results. That's the last piece of essential outcomes. And that, Mike mentioned some of the measurement that you're looking to do. That'll be key and critical because you'll be able to tell your success story as you begin to hit those milestones. And that'll, again, feed back into the, just the environment and the culture at the agency.
That's great.
Well, I'll share a little perspective. As we were standing up our senior leadership team, we knew that there was an importance, and it was a focus area, as the chairman mentioned, personally of his, based on his experience with industry. And so we spent some time benchmarking others with leadership model. So we spent some time, obviously, with you during our senior leadership term retreat. We spent some time with some other industry folks to compare and contrast what we have done in the past. And so if we can pull up our current draft, and this is our domestic and international debut, and this is what you get for your price of entry free. And as we were drafting this, this concept, which we're casting as, strategic leadership and organizational effectiveness framework versus just a management model, because we really wanted it to resonate across the organization. This is not just a leadership thing. This is everybody in the agency that needs to take a piece of this. But as you can imagine, we tried every corporate layout you could imagine: pyramids, concentric circles, Parthenons.
Parthenons, yeah. You gotta have a Parthenon.
Complex flow charts, which we love. But we quickly realized that it was for it to critically resonate with NRC staff, we needed something else, and it had to be an atom. So anything else just wouldn't have the binding energy required to keep our values and principles in high energy. I was worried that was just going to go right over. Okay, good.
Nor would it maintain our reputation. Nerds outside the beltway, right?
So a little backstory there, but I sent out a message to everybody presenting. I'm like, there's one thing this audience loves, it's nuclear humor. So, but beyond just the physics pun, this structure really kind of represents the fundamental truth about our mindset. And as you can see in the center is our core safety and security mission. It's steadfast and central to everything we do. And as you've heard already, we characterize it as our North Star. And in accomplishing that mission and achieving our strategic goals, we're guided by our principles of good regulation, which are enduring, and organizational values. And the very orbits keep us on track. And as you see, framing this entire model, and this is where benchmarking in particular with IMPO was very helpful, we're doing this all while seeking to build a culture of accountability and a relentless pursuit of continual improvement. So early draft, subject to change, but you could say you saw it first.
All right, feel privileged.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. I know Mike spent some late nights working on this graphic, so I think we all appreciate it and can resonate with it. I want to turn to Andrea now. One of the things we've heard a few times this week is sort of how we're evolving in our communications, the NRC, with our regulated community. There are multiple vectors around this, but one of the areas I think it's worth highlighting is the communication tool that you and some of our key NRC leadership and staff developed about driving regulatory decisions through more effective communications. So can you talk a little bit about that guidance document and how that's led to cultural changes within the agency?
I can, and first, please forgive me, Mike, but I'm not sure I would call that nuclear humor. But I will, because you're now my boss. But and I don't have any nuclear jokes, so I'll just start with that. But seriously, I just want to pick up on one of the themes I heard from all of us is this theme about behaviors, which it sounds simple, but it's really not. And I think one of the things that has made the new procedure that we issued on communications with applicants successful is that we did define what that means by writing down specific examples and behaviors. And it is interesting because we've heard for years that really there was a need to do that. And I remember when I was on the transformation team, we talked about, what is risk-informed regulation? A lot of our staff were asking for us to kind of define what that means. And the thing is it could mean different things to different people. So I think writing it down was really important, and I have to give credit to you, Sabrina, because you sort of started that with the mission statement and writing down, what do we mean by the tenets of the mission statement in terms of, specific examples of what that means to different parts of the organization so that people could see themselves in it. So I think that's part of what made the communications procedure successful. And another thing that you did with the mission statement that we carried forward in the guidance on communications was having our staff take a look at it. And Jeff, you mentioned that getting to the hearts and minds of people and reaching out to the staff after leadership has set the direction to get their ideas of how they see themselves fitting into these processes has been really, really important. But another shout out from the past, I don't know if Morella's in here yet, but about a year ago, she started implementing this concept that really it's leadership that needs to set the direction on these things. And of course, we've known that for years, but what does that mean? She really encouraged us to kind of take the first stab at things. What is our vision for how this should look? And start with that and then get feedback from our staff. And so we started doing that about a year ago. And it's something that we brought forward in the mission statement and also in the new guidance that we issued on communications with applicants that I think has been really successful. But just to back up a minute, if you're not familiar with the new procedures on communication that we've issued, it really outlines expectations for interactions with applicants and the NRC staff. And we all know that communication is fundamental to enabling use of technology. And again, that sounds easy, but it's actually very difficult. And I think the mindset in the new process is to seek to understand and have mutual respect across the table, which also sounds easy, but can be difficult at times. And I remember, I think it was at last year's RIC, we had a panel on innovation. And during that panel, we had a speaker from the United Kingdom that talked about their efforts to move toward more of a model of mutual respect and understanding with applicants. And I remember sitting there thinking, there's something there. This is a golden nugget for the NRC that we need to bring forward. And that really started the discussion, the impetus for that. So thank you to the UK for kind of spurring the thought about the need for us to move forward in this area. So about a year ago, myself and Scott Flanders, I haven't seen him, but he could be in here somewhere, and Mo Schwabi, who's sitting in the second row there, really got together with a group of our staff, and if you don't mind me giving a shout out to them because we could have never done it without them. Tanny Santos, Joanne Ireland, Marcia Simon, Erin McCraw, who I know is here, and Beth Wetzel. Really got together to really open up our minds about what communication with applicants might look like and how it could look differently. And while we can all sit back and say, oh, well, it's just a guidance update, how could that implement change, or how, that could just be seen as something that's less consequential. It really got to the heart of what Commissioner Marzano was speaking about regulatory craft, and what does that mean? And what is the regulatory craft in communicating with our licensees, our expectations, and providing them feedback? And really what it did was shift our mindset from one that said, we can be independent, an independent safety regulator, and also be helpful. Again, that sounds simple, but it has been difficult at times. And really that was the shift in mindset that was needed. Not to say that the way we did business before was bad or wrong, it was just different. And we needed to kind of shift our thinking to be more of an enabler, be able to provide solutions to problems that applicants were bringing us that was different. And I think Judi spoke about really being able to be articulate about what a safety issue is, what do we mean by that, starting with the safety question in mind, and really articulating if we have a concern, what is it, and how could that be resolved, was something that was kind of new for us. And what the guidance lays out is the way that we set expectations for our staff to bring those ideas forward. And like I said, I think the reason why it became powerful is it really provided specific examples, if you take a look at it, of behaviors that support more of this, what I call a mutual respect and enabling mindset in our communications. And really with many of the other things that have changed over the last year, I keep saying what it did was it provided the clarity to our staff about where the line in the sand is. And I think, the challenge in the past was without that clarity about how far we could go with some of these concepts, people legitimately didn't understand how far could I go. And so we wrote it down for them now. And that, again, seemed simple, but it had been a challenge. And so like with many other things that we've changed over the last year, to me, it was just giving people the permission and the clarity that was needed to set the expectations for the way that we'll behave, that was really more solutions oriented. That was a key in that guidance document.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would, Andrea, I would acknowledge, it's more than just a document. I read it, and I like the way it is laid out with the examples, like you said. I can easily see where that adds a lot of clarity to the entire staff. And then my view is that document, and many other documents, really could be used to teach and coach and mentor around the specifics. And I can see where that's going to be of great benefit to the agency.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. I remember my qualifications as an inspector many, many years ago at this point. But it was one of the first things that we learned, and it was reinforced, is you're not a consultant. You're not here to consult with the industry. And it wasn't clear what that meant, but I think we erred on the side of anything that could be viewed as helpful, even if it's not saying this is the path you should take, could be viewed as consulting, and we didn't want to do that, right? So we all wanted to be the high performers that we know the NRC is. So I think that environment where there's clarity around what consulting looks like and what's being a helpful, prudent regulator has certainly been helpful within the agency. Now, one of the questions that we received...
Can I just add one thing about
Sure,
this?
Judi.
I do think we're very excited about this guidance and being clear, and we think communication is really important. As many of you know, we do a series of reports on improving licensing efficiency based on, again, the way we do our work of anonymized interviews and really understanding from both the industry and the NRC perspective about how licensing is going. And this communication is a two-way process, and whenever we do recommendations, we make recommendations for both applicants and licensees and the NRC. And I think that there's a lot in what you're putting in your guidance that could help licensees as well. And I think the sort of successful communication is a shared success, and I really think that I'm seeing improvements on both sides, where the licensee and the applicant is being encouraged to be clear about their expectations, as you are, and then I think things work out best when it's thought about as a shared success and in an appropriate way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Let me just ask one quick follow-up.
I don't want to drag out the conversation, but just one point since Judi spoke. One of the things Judi talked about is transparency, which it's a tenet of the way the NRC does business, and it will always remain a tenet of the way we do business. But this guidance document also touched on the issue of transparency and what that means when you're talking to an applicant. And I really believe transparency applies to our interactions with the public. We heard that from several commissioners today and yesterday, but it also applies to how we communicate with our applicants, and we owe it to them to be transparent about what safety issues we have and how those issues can be solved. And so the other topic that is really addressed in that guidance document, if you dig into it, is what is the nature of how transparent do we need to be? When can we have closed meetings versus when do meetings need to be open? And it is okay to have a closed meeting as long as we're communicating with the public what our regulatory decisions are and the basis for those. So kind of drawing those lines on the issue of transparency as well was addressed in the guidance document.
I'm glad you hit on that. That was actually where I was going to go, so thank you for leaning into that. One of the questions we received from our audience was really asking, How do we balance this increase in informal communications with our applicants, or that helpful spirit, if you will, with that independence and the stakeholder confidence? So what do you see as that balance in terms of the communications approaches?
Well, I can start, and others might want to chime in, but in the guidance document, you'll see that where you draw the line is the NRC is not going to make a decision for an applicant or say that there's only one way to skin the cat or one solution to a problem. That's always up to our applicants. And so we maintain our independence by not dictating the outcome, but giving potential solutions of what might fit into our regulatory infrastructure. And so to me, that's how we balance our need for independence with our mission, which is also to enable. And as far as the transparency piece, like I said, we owe it to the public to provide clarity in our decisions as well as the basis for those decisions. So those must always be made public. But there's different ways you could go about to finding a solution and also being transparent.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're running short on time. I wish I had the time machine so we could rewind a bit and have a few more minutes. But in our last 5 minutes, if I could ask each of our panelists perhaps to offer a final reflection, as you come back to thinking of the theme, evolving the NRC mindset, culture, mission, and the future of regulation. What message do you want to leave with our audience of how we should be focused moving forward?
I would say, it's more than just words on the page. The model and the illustration is just a helpful communication tool. One of the biggest insights I've learned from benchmarking others in their management model is the history of the agency. We've done a really good job of measuring the outcomes. And where I think there's a gap for us is really being very deliberate about measuring the behaviors that led to those outcomes, defining what those behaviors should be, and making that a leadership focus across the board in a sustainable way. The goal for me is long past the time when we're all out of here, that the intent and the purpose of us pulling together this management model, leadership model, endures long past us, and that we do actually see an agency that continues to seek excellence and continues to improve long after we're gone.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, I would say, I think we need to all remember that we're really looking for the same thing. Whether you're a licensee, whether you're at the agency, whether you're at IMPO, WANO, we want high-performing, highly reliable nuclear power plants and other uses of nuclear. And I think if we can keep remembering that is kind of the shared pool of knowledge that we're working from, I think you can be transparent. I think you can get into a level of helpfulness, and also have the lines of responsibility continue to be very clear on who is responsible for that decision. And it's the licensee's responsibility to operate that plant in a safe and reliable way. And even if they're getting help from the regulator, they're getting help from IMPO in understanding what that next step might be. And the other thing that I would say is all of our members, your licensees, they run businesses, and they work better in an environment of predictability, clarity, and timeliness, and being able to get on to the most important things. And Commissioner Weaver mentioned earlier today about, if you think about resources, it's a one-for-one. If IMPO's driving the members, or you're driving the licensees to focus on things that are not the most important from a safety standpoint or even a reliability standpoint, they can't use those resources on something else that may be important. So I think if we keep ourselves in that kind of mental thought, I think we're going to all be in a good spot. I'm optimistic, quite honestly, with what I'm hearing and seeing at the agency and also within the industry.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that hasn't come up as much, so I'll just mention it for the end, is that in a way, the sort of whole performance-based management can be very empowering. It can also be implemented in a way that isn't, depending how it's done. But I think performance-based management can really free people up to creatively meet the expectations. And so having clear expectations and being complimented or rewarded for meeting those expectations and performing well can be a really freeing and make it up for a really high-performing place. And I see a trend towards that. I hope that y'all can keep it up. And I think it's important that we recognize that there are people at the NRC throughout the organization who, with clear performance-based objectives, will come up with really interesting ideas, will be able to execute in ways that management won't necessarily have thought of. And so I really think it's a way to unleash the best of us here. And I guess I want to say one thing about the possibility of change. It's like I said at the beginning, it's been a long year, a lot of change. I do think change is possible. We see it, we're seeing it. And I also think adjustment is possible. And I think as we go through this and we learn things, I think that from the staff, from the management, we'll find things that we have to adjust and fix. And I think this goes as far as the administration. I think that this is an administration that wants to succeed, and part of their success is what you all do. And I think that there is they've demonstrated in a few instances, at least that I mentioned, where they actually can adjust. And so I am hopeful that we will be able to have a resilient and adaptable approach to this.
Thank you.
I don't know that I have anything fundamentally new to say, and I see we just ran out of time as I started speaking, but I'll finish my thought. So, my thought is it's been a journey for the NRC. A lot of what we're talking about here and a lot of what we heard this morning in terms of risk-informed regulation, they're not new concepts. They're things that have come up through the years. Somebody mentioned the 1995 Commission memo on PRA and used performance-based regulation. I actually one time researched it, and those concepts went back to 1985. I found a memo from 1985 with the concept. So my point is it's been an evolution. We've made a lot of progress in the last year. I'm really proud of where we are. Are we there yet? I don't think so. I think what is different now is that common mission to bring more clean, enabling energy to this country. That alignment among leadership of where we need to go is what's different and what we really need to hang on to. And I'll echo what Judi said, that I think one thing for us in the future is to think about really being able to pivot when we need to pivot, when something's not working, submitting it's not working and moving in a different direction. That's something that has been a challenge that I think is still a challenge for us that we'll need to tackle in the future.
Thank you. Well, I want to express my appreciation to our panelists, but we'll come to a close now. Don't go anywhere. We're going to head straight into the next discussion, but please join me in thanking our panel.